The morning sun cast long shadows across the flight deck of the USS Enterprise as Lieutenant Sarah Martinez walked toward her FA-18 Super Hornet. At 28, she had already earned a reputation as one of the finest pilots in the Navy, with over 300 carrier landings and 2 combat deployments under her belt. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her flight suit bore the patches of her squadron, the Golden Eagles. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Texas, where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother taught elementary school. From childhood, she had dreamed of flying, spending hours watching planes at the local airfield. When she announced her intention to join the Navy and become a pilot, many in her conservative hometown questioned whether a woman belonged in such a dangerous profession. But Sarah's determination never wavered. The Enterprise was part of a carrier strike group conducting routine operations in the South China Sea. The massive ship, over 1,000 feet long and home to 5,000 sailors and Marines, moved steadily through the calm waters. Around it, several destroyers and cruisers maintained protective positions, their radar systems constantly scanning for potential threats. As Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection, she noticed unusual activity on the bridge. Officers were moving with more urgency than typical for a routine training mission. She had been scheduled for a standard patrol flight, but something felt different about today's atmosphere aboard the ship. Commander James Harrison, the ship's executive officer, approached Sarah's aircraft. Harrison was a veteran of 25 years, respected by everyone aboard for his fairness and dedication to his crew. His weathered face showed concern as he handed Sarah a sealed packet containing her mission orders. Sarah opened the envelope and read the contents carefully. Her mission was to conduct reconnaissance over a disputed area where intelligence suggested unusual naval activity. The orders were routine, but Harrison's expression suggested otherwise. He leaned closer and spoke in a low voice that only she could hear. The commander explained that satellite imagery had detected several unidentified vessels in international waters, approximately 200 miles from their current position. These ships had been maintaining radio silence and appeared to be conducting coordinated maneuvers. The Pentagon wanted eyes on the situation, and Sarah's reconnaissance mission would provide crucial intelligence about the vessel's intentions and capabilities. Sarah nodded, understanding the importance of her assignment. She had conducted similar missions before, though rarely with such evident concern from senior officers. As she climbed into her cockpit, she noticed increased security around the flight deck. Armed Marines stood at strategic positions, and additional crew members monitored the surrounding waters with binoculars. The flight deck crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing Sarah's aircraft for launch. The catapult officer made final checks while the aircraft's engines spooled up to full power. Sarah ran through her pre-flight checklist, ensuring all systems were functioning properly. Her radio crackled with communications from the control tower, confirming weather conditions and flight path clearance. As her Super Hornet was positioned on the catapult, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied every carrier. Launch. The catapult officer raised his hand, signaling final preparations. Sarah saluted, indicating her readiness, and gripped the controls tightly. The catapult fired, accelerating her aircraft from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. Climbing away from the carrier, Sarah marveled at the view of the strike group below. The Enterprise looked like a small city surrounded by its protective escorts. The destroyers maintained their positions in a defensive screen, their sleek hulls cutting through the water with precision. Everything appeared normal from her vantage point. But she knew appearances could be deceiving in these waters. Sarah set course for her designated reconnaissance area, flying at an altitude that would keep her above most surface-to-air missile threats while maintaining good visibility of surface vessels. Her aircraft's sophisticated sensors began collecting data as she approached the target zone, automatically recording radar signatures and visual imagery of any ships encountered. 2 hours into her flight, Sarah spotted the first unidentified vessel. Through her aircraft's targeting system, she could see it was a large warship, gray-painted and flying no identifying flags. As she circled at a safe distance, taking photographs and recording radar data, she noticed the ship's crew scrambling to battle stations. Gun turrets began tracking her aircraft's movement. Additional vessels appeared on her radar screen as she continued her reconnaissance. 3 more warships had positioned themselves in a loose formation, all maintaining strict radio silence. Sarah documented their positions and estimated their capabilities based on their visible armaments and configurations. The ships appeared to be modern destroyers, well-equipped and professionally operated. Sarah's radio suddenly crackled with an urgent transmission from the Enterprise. The voice of the air traffic controller was tense as he directed her to immediately return to base. Intelligence analysts aboard the carrier had been monitoring her reconnaissance data in real time, and what they observed was causing significant concern among senior officers. As Sarah banked her aircraft toward home, she noticed increased activity among the unidentified vessels. They had changed formation and appeared to be accelerating toward her general direction. Her aircraft's radar warning receiver began detecting multiple search radars attempting to lock onto her position, indicating the foreign ships were preparing to engage aerial targets. The flight back to the Enterprise seemed longer than usual as Sarah processed what she had observed. The unidentified vessels were clearly military ships, operating with hostile intent in international waters. Their professional appearance and coordinated movements suggested they belonged to a well-trained navy, though their refusal to identify themselves violated international maritime law. Upon landing aboard the Enterprise, Sarah was immediately escorted to the intelligence briefing room where senior officers waited to debrief her mission. The photographs and sensor data from her reconnaissance flight were already being analyzed by specialists who confirmed her observations. The unidentified vessels posed a significant threat to the carrier strike group and potentially to international shipping in the region. Admiral Robert Chen, the strike group commander, studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The foreign vessels' positions and movements suggested they were attempting to establish control over crucial shipping lanes used by commercial traffic from multiple nations. Their hostile reaction to Sarah's reconnaissance indicated they were prepared to use force to maintain their positions. That evening, as Sarah completed her mission reports, she couldn't shake the feeling that today's reconnaissance had uncovered something much larger than a routine naval exercise. The faces of senior officers showed a level of concern she had rarely witnessed, and preparations aboard the Enterprise suggested they were expecting significant developments in the coming hours. The next morning brought disturbing news to the Enterprise's command center. Overnight, the unidentified vessels had moved closer to major shipping lanes, effectively creating a blockade that prevented commercial traffic from passing through the area. 3 cargo ships had already been forced to change course, and reports indicated the foreign warships were conducting aggressive inspections of any vessels attempting to transit the disputed waters. Admiral Chen convened an emergency. Meeting with his senior staff, including Commander Harrison and the ship's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos. Santos had been analyzing overnight satellite imagery and radio intercepts, building a clearer picture of the foreign fleet's intentions and capabilities. Her findings were deeply troubling. The intelligence officer reported that the foreign vessels were operating with sophisticated electronic warfare equipment, capable of jamming communications and radar systems. They had established a communications network using encrypted channels, indicating a high level of operational security and military professionalism. Most concerning was evidence suggesting additional ships were en route to join the blockade force. Sarah had been assigned a standby status, ready to launch at a moment's notice for additional reconnaissance missions. As she waited in the ready room with other pilots, conversations were subdued and focused on the developing situation. Everyone understood they were potentially facing the most serious international incident in years, with their carrier strike group positioned at the center of escalating tensions. The morning briefing revealed that diplomatic channels were working frantically to resolve the crisis through negotiation. The Pentagon had been in contact with multiple foreign governments, attempting to identify which nation controlled the blockading vessels and establish communication with their leadership. However, all diplomatic efforts had been met with silence or denials of involvement. Captain Elizabeth Morgan, the Enterprise's commanding officer, addressed the crew over the ship's internal communication system. Her steady voice conveyed both the seriousness of the situation and confidence in her crew's ability to handle whatever developments might arise. She emphasized that their mission remained unchanged: protect international shipping and maintain freedom of navigation in international waters. As tensions mounted, Sarah received new orders for an immediate reconnaissance flight. This mission would be different from her previous day's patrol. Intelligence analysts needed real-time assessment of the foreign fleet's defensive capabilities and any changes in their formation or equipment. The stakes were higher now, as her observations might determine how the United States would respond to this unprecedented challenge. Sarah's pre-flight preparations were interrupted by an urgent message from the ship's communications center. A civilian cargo vessel, the merchant ship Pacific Dawn, had ignored warnings and attempted to transit through the blockaded area. The foreign warships had fired warning shots and were now demanding the cargo ship's crew prepare for boarding and inspection. The Pacific Dawn was carrying humanitarian supplies to several Southeast Asian ports, including medical equipment and food aid desperately needed by communities affected by recent natural disasters. The ship's captain had made the difficult decision to continue through the disputed waters, rather than delay critical supplies by taking a longer route around the blocked shipping lanes. Admiral Chen faced a crucial decision: allowing the foreign warships to board and inspect an American-flagged vessel would set a dangerous precedent, potentially legitimizing their illegal blockade. However, any military intervention risked escalating the crisis into open conflict. The situation required careful balance between protecting American interests and avoiding actions that might trigger a larger war. Sarah's reconnaissance mission took on new urgency as she prepared to launch. Her aircraft would provide real-time intelligence about the developing situation around the Pacific Dawn, allowing commanders to make informed decisions about potential rescue operations. The crew prepared her Super Hornet with additional fuel tanks and extended-range sensors for a longer mission duration. As Sarah taxied toward the catapult, she observed increased activity throughout the carrier strike group. The destroyers had moved closer to the Enterprise, tightening their protective formation. Gun crews were manning their battle stations, and radar operators were tracking every aircraft and surface vessel within hundreds of miles of their position. The catapult launch felt different this time, carrying weight beyond the physical forces involved. Sarah knew her mission might determine whether thousands of sailors would soon be engaged in combat operations. As she climbed away from the carrier, she could see the entire strike group below, looking both powerful and vulnerable in the vast expanse of ocean. Flying toward the crisis area, Sarah monitored multiple radio frequencies, listening to communications between various military and civilian vessels. The Pacific Dawn's captain was attempting to negotiate with the foreign warships, explaining his humanitarian cargo and requesting safe passage. His transmissions revealed growing desperation as the foreign vessels closed in around his ship. Sarah's radar screen showed a complex tactical picture as she approached the scene. The foreign warships had surrounded the Pacific Dawn in a tight formation, with their main guns trained on the cargo vessel. Additional foreign ships were approaching from the north, apparently responding to calls for reinforcement. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond diplomatic solutions. Through her aircraft's powerful cameras, Sarah could observe the dramatic scene unfolding below. Armed boarding parties from the foreign warships were preparing to transfer to the Pacific Dawn, while the cargo ship's crew gathered nervously on deck. The merchant vessel was clearly outgunned and had no choice but to comply with the warship's demands. Sarah transmitted her observations back to the Enterprise, providing detailed intelligence about the foreign ships' positions and apparent intentions. Her reports were immediately forwarded to Washington, where senior officials were monitoring the crisis and considering response options. Every detail of her reconnaissance could influence decisions affecting international relations and potentially military action. As she circled the area, maintaining careful distance from the foreign warships, Sarah noticed their radar systems were actively tracking her aircraft. Several ships had surface-to-air missile systems trained in her direction, clearly prepared to engage if she approached too closely. The foreign fleet was demonstrating professional military discipline while maintaining their aggressive posture. The boarding of the Pacific Dawn proceeded with military precision as Sarah watched from above. Foreign naval personnel systematically searched the cargo vessel while keeping its crew under armed guard. The inspection appeared thorough and professional, but the underlying message was clear. These waters were now under foreign control, and all vessels would be subject to their authority. Sarah's fuel gauges indicated she would need to return to the Enterprise soon, but the developing situation below made her reluctant to leave. Her real-time intelligence was providing crucial information for decision-makers, and any significant developments during her absence might affect the overall response to the crisis. The radio crackled with new communications as Sarah prepared to depart the area. The foreign warships were apparently satisfied with their inspection of the Pacific Dawn and were preparing to release the cargo vessel. However, they were also issuing broader warnings to all shipping in the area, claiming authority over the disputed waters and threatening to intercept any vessels that attempted to transit without their permission. As Sarah flew back toward the Enterprise, she processed everything she had witnessed. The foreign fleet was operating with clear strategic objectives and professional military capabilities. Their blockade was effectively controlling one of the world's most important shipping routes, and they appeared prepared to use force to maintain their position. The situation had moved far beyond a simple territorial dispute into a direct challenge to international maritime law. Upon returning to the Enterprise, Sarah was immediately escorted to an emergency briefing with Admiral Chen and his senior staff. The intelligence she had gathered during her reconnaissance mission painted a troubling picture of the foreign fleet's capabilities and intentions. The boarding of the Pacific Dawn had been conducted with military precision, demonstrating that these were not rogue vessels, but rather units of a professional navy operating under clear orders. Lieutenant Commander Santos presented her analysis of Sarah's reconnaissance data alongside overnight intelligence reports from multiple sources. Satellite imagery revealed that additional foreign vessels were converging on the disputed area, including submarines detected by underwater sensors, deployed throughout the region. The blockade was expanding into a major naval operation involving dozens of ships and thousands of personnel. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing ship positions and movement patterns. The foreign fleet's deployment suggested they were prepared for a prolonged standoff, with supply vessels and tankers positioned to support extended operations. Their formation indicated advanced naval training and sophisticated command and control capabilities rivaling those of major world powers. The Pentagon had identified the foreign vessels as belonging to a regional power that had been increasingly assertive in territorial disputes over the past several years. However, this blockade represented an unprecedented escalation, directly challenging international maritime law and threatening global commerce. Diplomatic protests had been met with silence, and back-channel communications had failed to establish any dialogue with the foreign government. Sarah learned that her next mission would be far more dangerous than previous reconnaissance flights. Intelligence analysts needed detailed information about the foreign fleet's air defense systems and electronic warfare capabilities. This assessment would be crucial if military action became necessary to break the blockade and restore freedom of navigation to the shipping lanes. The briefing revealed that several allied nations were considering joint action to address the crisis. Naval forces from friendly countries were moving toward the area, potentially creating a coalition response to the illegal blockade. However, coordination between multiple navies would require careful planning and clear rules of engagement to prevent misunderstandings that might escalate the situation. As Sarah prepared for her mission, she noticed increased security measures throughout the Enterprise. Armed Marines patrolled sensitive areas of the ship, and access to the flight deck was restricted to essential personnel. The carrier's defensive systems had been activated, with close-in weapon systems and missile interceptors ready to engage incoming threats. The pre-flight briefing for Sarah's mission included detailed intelligence about the foreign fleet's air defense capabilities. Enemy ships were equipped with advanced surface-to-air missile systems capable of engaging targets at long range and high altitude. Her aircraft would need to operate carefully to gather necessary intelligence while avoiding hostile engagement. Sarah's Super Hornet was configured with specialized electronic reconnaissance equipment for this mission. The additional sensors would allow her to analyze enemy radar systems and communication frequencies, providing crucial intelligence about their command structure and defensive capabilities. However, the equipment also made her aircraft heavier and less maneuverable, increasing her vulnerability to enemy fire. As she taxied toward the catapult, Sarah observed other aircraft being prepared for launch. Fighter escorts would accompany her mission, ready to engage any hostile aircraft that might threaten her reconnaissance operations. The Enterprise's air wing was demonstrating its full capabilities, with multiple squadrons ready to support whatever actions might be required. The catapult launch seemed routine despite the mission's importance, but Sarah felt the weight of responsibility as her aircraft accelerated down the flight deck. Intelligence gathered during this flight might determine whether thousands of military personnel would soon be engaged in combat operations. The stakes had never been higher for any mission she had flown. Flying toward the disputed area, Sarah monitored communications between various military units. Radio traffic had increased significantly as Allied forces coordinated their response to the crisis. Multiple languages filled the airwaves as naval vessels from different countries maneuvered into positions around the blocked shipping lanes. Sarah's escort fighters maintained formation around her aircraft as they approached the foreign fleet's position. The enemy vessels had spread out over a larger area, creating multiple defensive zones that would complicate any military response. Their positioning demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning and thorough understanding of modern naval warfare principles. Through her aircraft's sensors, Sarah began collecting detailed intelligence about the foreign ship's radar systems and communication equipment. The data revealed advanced technology comparable to systems used by major military powers. These were not outdated vessels, but rather modern warships equipped with state-of-the-art defensive systems. As Sarah's aircraft circled the foreign fleet at maximum sensor range, she noticed increased activity among the enemy vessels. Additional ships were arriving to reinforce the blockade, including what appeared to be a command vessel with extensive communication arrays. The foreign fleet was expanding its capabilities and preparing for extended operations. The enemy's response to Sarah's reconnaissance was immediate and professional. Multiple radar systems began tracking her aircraft, while surface-to-air missile systems rotated to maintain targeting solutions. Warning messages were transmitted on international emergency frequencies, ordering her to withdraw from the area or face hostile action. Sarah's escort fighters moved closer to her aircraft as the situation became more tense. Enemy fighter aircraft were detected launching from a distant airfield, apparently scrambling to intercept the American reconnaissance mission. The tactical situation was escalating rapidly as both sides demonstrated their military capabilities. Radio. Communications with the Enterprise became more urgent as controllers tracked the approaching enemy aircraft. Sarah's mission was providing valuable intelligence, but her safety was becoming increasingly questionable as hostile forces closed in around her position. The decision to continue or withdraw would need to be made quickly. Through her sensors, Sarah detected sophisticated electronic warfare equipment aboard the foreign vessels. They were capable of jamming communications and radar systems, potentially blinding American forces during any military engagement. This capability represented a significant threat that would need to be addressed in any operational planning. The approaching enemy fighters were identified as modern interceptors, well equipped for air-to-air combat and capable of engaging targets at long range. Sarah's escort fighters prepared for potential combat while maintaining their protective formation around her reconnaissance aircraft. The situation was approaching the point where hostile engagement seemed inevitable. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through Sarah's radio, personally ordering her to complete her reconnaissance mission despite the approaching threats. The intelligence she was gathering was too valuable to abandon, and her observations might be the last opportunity to assess enemy capabilities before diplomatic or military action was required. As enemy fighters closed to within 50 miles of her position, Sarah completed her sensor sweeps of the foreign fleet's defensive systems. The data she had collected revealed weaknesses in their formation that might be exploited during military operations, as well as strengths that would make any engagement costly and dangerous. The order to withdraw came just as enemy fighters approached missile range of Sarah's position. Her escort fighters maintained their protective formation as all American aircraft turned toward the Enterprise at maximum speed. Behind them, the foreign fleet continued its illegal blockade, now reinforced with additional vessels and apparently prepared for whatever response might come. During the flight back to the carrier, Sarah processed everything she had observed during the mission. The foreign fleet represented a formidable military force operating with clear strategic objectives and professional capabilities. Any attempt to break their blockade would require carefully coordinated action by multiple Allied forces, and the outcome would be far from certain. The situation aboard the Enterprise reached a critical point as intelligence analysts processed the data from Sarah's reconnaissance mission. The foreign fleet's capabilities exceeded initial estimates, and their defensive positions would make any military intervention extremely challenging. Admiral Chen faced the difficult task of preparing his strike group for potential combat while hoping diplomatic solutions might still prevent open warfare. Sarah's debriefing revealed disturbing details about the enemy's preparations. The foreign vessels had established overlapping fields of fire that would make approach by surface ships nearly impossible without significant losses. Their air defense systems were integrated and sophisticated, capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Most concerning was evidence of submarine activity in the area, adding another layer of complexity to any military response. Commander Harrison coordinated defensive preparations throughout the carrier strike group as tensions continued to escalate. The destroyers had formed a tight protective screen around the Enterprise, their sophisticated radar systems scanning for incoming threats. Combat air patrols were maintained around the clock, with fighter aircraft ready to intercept any hostile aircraft that might approach the American forces. The Pentagon's response to the crisis was swift and comprehensive. Additional naval forces were being dispatched to the region, including submarines and amphibious assault ships carrying marine expeditionary units. Allied nations were also contributing ships and aircraft to a growing coalition force aimed at restoring freedom of navigation to the blocked shipping lanes. Sarah received orders for another mission, this time focused on monitoring the foreign fleet's submarine activities. Intelligence suggested that enemy submarines were positioning themselves to attack any coalition forces that might attempt to break the blockade. Her aircraft's sophisticated sonar equipment would be crucial for detecting and tracking these underwater threats. The pre-flight briefing for this mission included detailed information about submarine detection techniques and the foreign navy's underwater capabilities. Enemy submarines were believed to be modern diesel-electric vessels, quiet and difficult to detect when operating submerged. Their presence added a significant threat to coalition surface ships and complicated any military planning. As Sarah prepared her aircraft for launch, she noticed increased activity throughout the Enterprise's hangar deck. Maintenance crews were working around the clock to ensure maximum aircraft availability, while ordnance personnel loaded weapons systems in preparation for potential combat operations. The entire ship buzzed with focused energy as thousands of sailors prepared for whatever might come. The mission launch proceeded smoothly, despite deteriorating weather conditions in the operations area. Tropical storm systems were moving through the region, creating challenging flying conditions and reducing visibility for surveillance operations. The rough seas would also affect ship operations, potentially limiting the effectiveness of both coalition and enemy naval forces. Flying through intermittent rain squalls toward the submarine detection area, Sarah marveled at the complexity of the tactical situation developing below. Dozens of military vessels from multiple nations were converging on the disputed waters, creating the largest naval concentration in the region since World War II. The potential for misunderstandings and accidental engagements was enormous. Sarah's sonar equipment began detecting underwater contacts as she reached the designated search area. The foreign submarines were maintaining disciplined positions, apparently following well-coordinated patrol patterns that would maximize their effectiveness against surface vessels. Their professional operation indicated extensive training and sophisticated command and control systems. Radio communications revealed increasing tension between coalition forces and the foreign fleet. Several attempts at direct communication had been rebuffed, with the enemy vessels maintaining strict radio silence, except for occasional warnings to approaching ships. The lack of dialogue was making it impossible to find peaceful solutions to the escalating crisis. As Sarah continued her submarine detection mission, she observed significant changes in the surface picture below. Additional foreign vessels had arrived during the night, including what appeared to be a helicopter carrier with extensive aviation facilities. The enemy fleet was demonstrating its ability to sustain and reinforce its blockade operations despite growing international pressure. The weather conditions continued to deteriorate as Sarah's mission progressed, with visibility dropping to just a few miles in heavy rain. Her aircraft's radar was essential for navigation and surveillance, but the storm systems were also providing cover for submarine movements that might otherwise be detected by surface vessels or aircraft. Through breaks in the weather, Sarah could observe the foreign fleet's response to approaching coalition forces. Enemy ships had modified their formation to create defensive zones around critical vessels while maintaining their blockade of the shipping lanes. Their tactical discipline remained impressive despite the obviously stressful situation they faced. Sarah's sensors detected increased submarine activity as coalition naval forces moved closer to the disputed area. The enemy's underwater vessels were apparently preparing for potential combat operations, moving into positions where they could effectively engage approaching surface ships. The tactical picture was becoming increasingly complex and dangerous for all forces involved. An urgent radio transmission from the Enterprise directed Sarah to investigate a specific area where sonar contacts suggested possible submarine activity near coalition shipping. A supply vessel carrying fuel and supplies for Allied forces had reported possible torpedo signatures on their sonar equipment, indicating enemy submarines might be preparing for attacks on coalition logistics. Flying toward the reported contact area, Sarah's mission took on new urgency as the possibility of actual combat loomed larger. Her detection of enemy submarine positions might be crucial for protecting coalition forces and preventing the first shots of what could become a major naval engagement. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever before. The submarine contact proved to be a modern diesel-electric vessel operating at shallow depth, apparently conducting surveillance of coalition ship movements. Sarah's detection equipment gathered detailed information about the submarine's signature and operating characteristics, intelligence that would be valuable for other anti-submarine warfare units in the area. As Sarah transmitted her contact information back to the Enterprise, she observed the beginning of what appeared to be coordinated submarine movements throughout the operational area. Multiple underwater contacts were changing position simultaneously, suggesting centralized command and control of the enemy's submarine forces. The foreign fleet was demonstrating impressive tactical coordination across all warfare domains. The return flight to the Enterprise provided Sarah with opportunities to observe the overall tactical situation from above. Coalition naval forces were approaching the disputed area from multiple directions, creating a complex three-dimensional battle space involving surface ships, submarines, and aircraft from numerous countries. The scene below resembled a chess game with dozens of players and thousands of pieces. Weather conditions around the Enterprise had worsened significantly during Sarah's mission, with high winds and heavy seas making carrier operations extremely challenging. The ship's crew demonstrated their professionalism as they prepared to recover aircraft despite dangerous conditions that tested both equipment and human capabilities to their limits. Landing aboard the Enterprise in rough weather required all of Sarah's skill and experience as a naval aviator. The carrier's deck was pitching and rolling in heavy seas, while strong crosswinds complicated the final approach. Her successful landing was a testament to both her abilities and the exceptional training provided to all naval aviation personnel. Debriefing following Sarah's submarine detection mission revealed the extent of enemy underwater activities in the operational area. Intelligence analysts estimated that at least 6 submarines were operating in coordinated patrol patterns, positioned to interdict coalition forces approaching the blocked shipping lanes. This underwater threat would significantly complicate any military response to the crisis. Admiral Chen studied the latest intelligence reports with growing concern about the evolving tactical situation. The foreign fleet had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities across all warfare domains, from surface ships and submarines to aircraft and electronic warfare systems. Any military action to break the blockade would require careful coordination and acceptance of significant risks to coalition forces. The crisis reached a turning point when intelligence reports confirmed that the foreign fleet was preparing to expand their blockade operations. Satellite imagery revealed additional naval forces departing enemy ports, including amphibious assault, ships carrying what appeared to be occupation forces. The blockade was evolving from a temporary demonstration into a permanent seizure of international waters. Sarah received orders for her most dangerous mission yet. Intelligence analysts needed real-time assessment of enemy preparations for expanded operations, particularly any indications that they might attempt to seize islands or establish permanent bases in the disputed area. Her reconnaissance would provide crucial information for coalition planners who were preparing multiple response options. The pre-flight briefing revealed that diplomatic efforts had completely failed. The foreign government had rejected all attempts at negotiation and was apparently committed to maintaining their illegal blockade regardless of international pressure. Military action was becoming increasingly likely as coalition forces reached their final positions around the disputed waters. As Sarah prepared her aircraft, she learned that her mission would be different from previous reconnaissance flights. This time, she would be operating as part of a larger coordinated intelligence operation involving multiple aircraft and ships. The goal was to gather comprehensive intelligence about enemy capabilities while demonstrating coalition resolve to respond to continued aggression. The Enterprise's flight deck was a scene of controlled chaos as multiple aircraft prepared for launch simultaneously. Fighter squadrons were launching combat air patrols while electronic warfare aircraft prepared to monitor and potentially jam enemy communications. Sarah's reconnaissance aircraft was just one element of a complex operation involving dozens of aircraft and ships. Weather conditions had improved somewhat, but heavy seas continued to affect ship operations throughout the region. The Enterprise maintained its position despite challenging conditions, demonstrating the professionalism and skill of its crew under increasingly difficult circumstances. Every sailor aboard understood that their actions might soon determine the outcome of a major international crisis. Sarah's launch proceeded smoothly despite the complex tactical situation developing around the carrier strike group. Multiple radar, Contacts showed friendly and potentially hostile aircraft operating throughout the region, creating a three-dimensional puzzle that required constant attention from air traffic controllers and tactical coordinators aboard the Enterprise. Flying toward her reconnaissance area, Sarah monitored radio communications between various coalition forces. The level of coordination between ships and aircraft from different countries was impressive, demonstrating years of training and joint exercises that prepared Allied forces for exactly this type of situation. Professional militaries worldwide had learned to work together effectively despite language and cultural differences. Sarah's first objective was to assess enemy preparations at a small island that intelligence suggested might be targeted for occupation. Satellite imagery had shown increased activity around the island's small harbor, with foreign naval vessels apparently conducting surveys of landing areas and defensive positions. Any attempt to seize the island would represent a significant escalation of the crisis. Through her aircraft's powerful sensors, Sarah could observe detailed preparations taking place around the disputed island. Foreign naval vessels had positioned themselves around the island's perimeter, while smaller craft conducted what appeared to be reconnaissance of potential landing sites. Combat engineers were apparently already ashore, preparing defensive positions and communication sites. The island's strategic importance was obvious from Sarah's aerial perspective. Located at the intersection of major shipping lanes, control of the island would allow the foreign fleet to establish permanent monitoring and potentially interdiction of all commercial traffic through the region. The island also provided an ideal location for radar installations and missile batteries that could threaten coalition forces. Sarah's sensors detected sophisticated radar and communication equipment being installed on the island by foreign technical personnel. The installations appeared to be permanent rather than temporary, confirming intelligence assessments that the enemy intended to maintain long-term control over the disputed area. The strategic implications of permanent foreign bases in international waters were enormous. As Sarah continued her reconnaissance, she observed the arrival of additional enemy vessels carrying what appeared to be construction equipment and permanent facilities. Prefabricated buildings and communication towers were being unloaded at the island's small harbor, while military personnel established defensive positions around key installations. The foreign fleet was clearly preparing for extended occupation rather than temporary demonstration. Radio communications revealed increasing concern among coalition commanders about the enemy's apparent intentions to establish permanent bases in international waters. The installation of permanent facilities would create facts on the ground that would be extremely difficult to reverse through diplomatic means. Military action was becoming the only viable option for preventing permanent foreign control over crucial shipping lanes. Sarah's mission expanded as she was directed to assess additional islands that might be targeted for similar occupation. Intelligence suggested that the foreign fleet had identified several strategic locations where permanent bases could effectively control maritime traffic throughout the region. The scope of their ambitions was becoming clear through detailed reconnaissance of their activities. Flying between multiple reconnaissance targets, Sarah observed the impressive scale of the foreign fleet's operations. Dozens of vessels were involved in coordinated activities across hundreds of square miles of ocean, demonstrating sophisticated planning and extensive resources. The enemy had clearly prepared for this operation over months or possibly years, developing detailed plans for establishing permanent control over disputed waters. The tactical situation became more dangerous as Sarah's reconnaissance activities attracted increased attention from enemy air defense systems. Multiple surface-to-air missile batteries were tracking her aircraft, while enemy fighters maintained combat air patrols that could intercept her reconnaissance missions. The foreign fleet was demonstrating its ability to defend its operations against coalition surveillance. Sarah's radio crackled with urgent communications as intelligence analysts aboard the Enterprise processed her reconnaissance data in real time. The enemy's preparations exceeded all previous estimates, with clear indications that they intended to establish permanent military bases throughout the disputed region. The strategic implications required immediate attention from senior political and military leaders. As Sarah completed her reconnaissance of the final target area, she observed what appeared to be the beginning of actual occupation operations. Foreign troops were coming ashore on one of the disputed islands, establishing defensive positions and raising their national flag over strategic facilities. The crisis had escalated beyond blockade operations into actual territorial seizure. The return flight to the Enterprise provided Sarah with a comprehensive view of the evolving tactical situation. Coalition naval forces had moved closer to the disputed area, creating the potential for direct confrontation with enemy vessels. The scene below resembled a powder keg ready to explode, with professional military forces from multiple nations positioned for potential combat operations. Admiral Chen's voice came through Sarah's radio with new orders as she approached the Enterprise. The intelligence she had gathered confirmed the worst fears of coalition planners, and immediate action was required to prevent the enemy from consolidating their control over the disputed islands. Sarah's reconnaissance had provided the final pieces of information needed for military planning. Landing aboard the Enterprise, Sarah could sense the increased tension throughout the ship. Crew members moved with greater urgency, and the ship's defensive systems were clearly at maximum readiness. The intelligence she had gathered during her mission would likely determine whether thousands of military personnel would soon be engaged in combat operations to restore international law and freedom of navigation. The debriefing following Sarah's mission revealed the full scope of the enemy's operations and their apparent intentions to establish permanent control over crucial shipping lanes. The foreign fleet had moved beyond temporary demonstration into actual territorial seizure, creating a situation that could not be resolved through diplomatic means alone. Military action was becoming inevitable as coalition forces prepared to respond to this unprecedented challenge to international maritime law. Sarah learned that her next mission would be part of a coordinated military response to the enemy's occupation of disputed islands. The coalition had decided that immediate action was necessary to prevent the foreign fleet from consolidating their control over international waters. Her reconnaissance capabilities would be crucial during the complex operations required to restore legitimate authority over the disputed area. The moment of truth arrived when Admiral Chen received authorization from Washington to begin Operation Freedom Passage, a coordinated military response designed to break the illegal blockade and restore international law to the disputed waters. Sarah found herself at the center of the most complex naval operation in decades, with her reconnaissance capabilities essential for the success of coalition forces from 6 different nations. The Enterprise transformed into a hub of intense activity as final preparations began for the multi-phase operation. Sarah's mission would be to provide real-time intelligence during the initial phase, when coalition forces would attempt to establish air superiority over the disputed area. Her aircraft would operate in extremely dangerous conditions, with enemy fighters and surface-to-air missiles threatening every moment of her flight. The pre-flight briefing revealed the scope of what coalition planners had developed during weeks of careful preparation. Operation Freedom Passage would begin with coordinated airstrikes against enemy air defense systems, followed by naval bombardment of key installations, and finally, the insertion of special operations forces to neutralize enemy occupation forces. On the disputed islands, Sarah's specific role involved flying ahead of the main strike force to provide battle damage assessment and identify targets of opportunity that might not have been detected during previous reconnaissance missions. Her aircraft would be among the first to enter hostile airspace, making her mission extremely dangerous but crucial for the overall operation's success. As Sarah completed her pre-flight checks, she reflected on the events that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as routine reconnaissance had evolved into participation in a major military operation with global implications. The illegal blockade had forced the international community to take decisive action to preserve freedom of navigation and maritime law. The launch sequence for Operation Freedom Passage was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her naval career. Dozens of aircraft from the Enterprise and Allied carriers launched in coordinated waves, creating a massive aerial armada designed to overwhelm enemy defenses through superior numbers and advanced technology. The sky filled with coalition aircraft. As the operation began, Sarah's flight toward the target area took her through increasingly dangerous airspace as enemy radar systems detected the approaching coalition forces. Surface-to-air missiles began launching from enemy ships and island installations, creating deadly fields of fire that coalition aircraft had to navigate while maintaining their mission objectives. The first phase of the operation unfolded with devastating effectiveness as coalition airstrikes systematically eliminated enemy air defense systems. Sarah watched from her reconnaissance position as precision-guided munitions destroyed radar installations and missile batteries that had threatened coalition forces for weeks. The enemy's sophisticated defensive network was being systematically dismantled by superior technology and tactics. Enemy fighters rose to meet the coalition air assault, leading to intense aerial combat throughout the disputed airspace. Sarah's escort fighters engaged hostile aircraft while she continued her reconnaissance mission, documenting the effectiveness of coalition strikes and identifying additional targets for follow-on attacks. The air battle was fierce but brief, with coalition forces quickly establishing air superiority. From her vantage point above the main battle area, Sarah could observe the second phase of Operation Freedom Passage, as coalition naval forces began engaging enemy ships with long-range missiles and naval gunfire. The foreign fleet that had maintained its illegal blockade for weeks was now under attack from multiple directions, with no escape from the overwhelming firepower directed against them. Several enemy vessels attempted to break away from the main battle area, but coalition submarines that had been positioned strategically throughout the region intercepted them before they could escape. The coordinated nature of the coalition response demonstrated months of careful planning and the effectiveness of professional military cooperation between allied nations. Sarah's reconnaissance revealed that enemy forces on the occupied islands were attempting to consolidate their defensive positions while calling for reinforcement from their homeland. However, coalition air power was preventing any external support from reaching the isolated garrison forces, who were now cut off from their command structure and supply lines. The third phase of Operation Freedom Passage began as special operations. Forces from multiple countries launched coordinated assaults on the occupied islands. Sarah provided real-time intelligence about enemy defensive positions and troop movements, allowing ground commanders to adjust their tactics and minimize casualties among both coalition and enemy forces. The battle for the islands was intense, but relatively brief as isolated enemy forces found themselves overwhelmed by superior coalition numbers and firepower. Many enemy personnel surrendered rather than continue fighting against impossible odds, while others attempted to escape in small boats that were quickly intercepted by coalition naval forces. As the main combat operations concluded, Sarah's mission shifted to damage assessment and monitoring for any remaining enemy forces that might still pose threats to coalition operations. Her reconnaissance flights revealed the complete effectiveness of Operation Freedom Passage, with enemy naval forces either destroyed or retreating toward their homeland ports. The aftermath of the operation required careful documentation of all enemy equipment and installations that had been captured or destroyed during the fighting. Sarah's aircraft photographed enemy technology and defensive positions, providing valuable intelligence about foreign military capabilities that would be useful for future planning and assessment of potential threats. Coalition forces began the complex process of restoring normal shipping operations to the previously blocked sea lanes. International maritime law was re-established through the presence of multinational naval patrols, while captured enemy personnel were processed according to international conventions governing the treatment of prisoners of war. Sarah's final mission in the operation involved escorting the first civilian vessels through the reopened shipping lanes, demonstrating that freedom of navigation had been restored to international waters. The merchant ships that had been forced to take longer routes during the blockade could now resume normal operations, restoring crucial commerce to the region. The Enterprise began its transit away from the operational area as coalition forces established permanent patrols to prevent any future attempts at illegal blockade operations. Sarah reflected on her role in the successful operation while watching the diverse coalition fleet that had worked together to restore international law and maritime freedom. The return voyage to their home port provided time for detailed analysis of lessons learned during Operation Freedom Passage. Sarah participated in extensive debriefings that would help improve future military operations, sharing her observations about enemy capabilities and the effectiveness of coalition tactics and technology. Weeks later, as the Enterprise entered its home port, Sarah could see families and friends gathered to welcome the returning crew. The successful completion of Operation Freedom Passage had restored international confidence in maritime law and demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated response to illegal aggression on the high seas. The operation had lasting implications for international relations and maritime security. The foreign government that had attempted to establish permanent control over international waters faced economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, while coalition nations strengthened their cooperation to prevent similar challenges to international law in the future. Sarah's experience during the crisis had transformed her understanding of her role as a naval aviator and the importance of professional military service in maintaining international stability. Her reconnaissance missions had provided crucial intelligence that enabled peaceful resolution of the crisis through demonstration of overwhelming military capability when diplomacy alone proved insufficient. The lessons learned from Operation Freedom Passage would influence naval operations and international cooperation for years to come, establishing precedents for response to illegal maritime aggression and demonstrating the continued importance of freedom of navigation in maintaining global commerce and international law.